On November 27, 1095, Pope Urban II stood before a crowd in Clermont, France, and called for war. He promised salvation to anyone who would march to Jerusalem and reclaim the Holy Land. What followed wasn't just a military campaign. It was a mass movement that would reshape two continents for nearly 200 years. Between 1095 and 1291, hundreds of thousands left their homes across 8 major crusades. The Crusades weren't just battles between kings and sultans. They were lived by farmers, merchants, mothers, and children caught in a war that rewrote the rules of everyday life. This is the story of what it meant to survive them. The call to crusade disrupted entire societies. In villages across France, Germany, and Italy, men abandoned their fields mid-harvest. They sold land, borrowed money, and left families behind with promises many would never keep. The journey from Paris to Jerusalem was over 2,500 miles through hostile territory, disease-ridden ports, and unforgiving deserts. Most crusaders had never traveled beyond their own village. Now they were crossing continents. The First Crusade alone took nearly 4 years. Subsequent crusades stretched across decades. Trade routes shifted. Cities rose and fell. Entire generations grew up knowing nothing but war. For 2 centuries, life in Europe and the Middle East moved to the rhythm of this conflict, whether you carried a sword or not. Most crusaders were poor. Farmers, blacksmiths, laborers with families who believed this journey would save their souls. They marched on foot. Their armor, if they had any, was leather or rusted chainmail. Many wore cloth tunics and carried wooden clubs. Their boots fell apart within weeks. Some wrapped their feet in rags soaked in animal fat to keep walking. Crusaders traveled 12 to 15 miles a day under the Mediterranean sun. Water was scarce. Food ran out constantly. Dysentery, typhus, and infected wounds killed more men than any battle. At night they slept on bare ground or crowded into rotting barns. Many never made it to Jerusalem. They died on roadsides, were sold into slavery, or deserted and tried to make it home. But for those who kept going, faith was the only currency that mattered. They believed dying in this war meant instant entry to heaven. That belief kept them moving when their bodies wanted to stop, and made them capable of extraordinary violence. For every man who left, a woman stayed behind. Wives became heads of households overnight. They ran farms, defended property claims in courts, and negotiated with landlords who often tried to seize lands from absent crusaders. Some fathers returned years later as strangers. Many never returned at all. Widows remarried quickly out of necessity. Orphans were left to survive on their own. But not all women stayed behind. Thousands traveled with the armies as washerwomen, cooks, or nurses. Chronicles mention women defending siege walls, carrying stones, tending the wounded under fire. The Crusades didn't give women power, but they forced women to take it. And when the wars finally ended, many refused to give it back. By 1100, Crusaders controlled Jerusalem, Antioch, Edessa, and Tripoli. These weren't just military outposts. They were living cities where Latin Christians, Greek Christians, Muslims, and Jews tried to coexist under constant threat. Markets sold European wool next to Persian silks. Churches stood beside mosques. Crusader lords married local Christian women. Muslim merchants traded with Frankish knights. Culture didn't clash so much as collide and adapt. Water was rationed during dry seasons. Every city lived under the shadow of war. Inside besieged cities, people ate horses, rats, leather belts. Disease killed more people than combat. Yet between the sieges, life continued. Children played in alleyways. Scholars debated theology. Doctors from different faiths shared medical knowledge. The Crusades created a strange, tense coexistence, violent and fragile, but undeniably real. For Muslims and Jews in crusader territories, daily life was a gamble. Some communities were tolerated and taxed. Others were massacred without warning. When the First Crusade reached the Rhineland in 1096, crusaders slaughtered entire Jewish communities before leaving Europe. In Jerusalem in 1099, Muslims and Jews were killed by the thousands. Some survivors negotiated ransoms and safe passage, paying protection money to multiple sides and moving between Christian and Muslim territories. In cities where coexistence held, they paid the jizya, a tax guaranteeing protection and limited autonomy. They worked as translators, doctors, and merchants. Some served in crusader courts. What didn't change was the constant uncertainty. A new leader could mean new persecution. Families hid valuables, prepared escape routes, and taught children to recognize danger before it arrived. The Crusades opened roads between Europe and the Middle East in ways that hadn't existed before. Pilgrims who once feared traveling to Jerusalem now moved in armed convoys. Merchants followed with grain, weapons, textiles, and spices. The journey was deadly. Bandits attacked caravans. Storms sank ships. Disease spread in crowded ports. But the rewards were real. Merchants returned with sugar, cotton, Damascus steel that sold for 10 times its Eastern price, and glass techniques that transformed Venetian industry. Europeans learned Arabic numerals. They encountered advanced medicine, astronomy, and engineering. They tasted new foods, wore new fabrics, and brought it all home. The Crusades were a war, but they were also a collision of worlds that hadn't spoken in centuries. Faith wasn't just belief during the Crusades, it was survival. The Church promised that dying in crusade meant instant salvation. Preachers told soldiers their sins were forgiven the moment they took up the cross. For Muslims defending their lands, jihad carried a similar promise. Martyrdom meant paradise. Faith was the lens through which every decision was made. Civilians lived in a world where every victory or defeat was interpreted as divine judgment. A successful harvest meant God's favor. A plague meant punishment. Priests and imams explained the world through theology because there was no other framework. This constant religious intensity shaped how people thought. It made them brave. It made them cruel. It gave them hope when hope was irrational. And it left them haunted. When the Crusader kingdoms fell in 1291, the wars didn't disappear. They lived on in the structures, ideas, and connections they had created. Trade routes stayed active. Italian city-states like Venice became economic powers, controlling 80% of Mediterranean trade by 1300. Goods from the Islamic world, spices, silk, paper, became staples of European life. Medicine advanced. European doctors studied Arabic texts and learned surgical techniques lost in the West. Architecture changed. Crusaders brought back pointed arches and advanced fortifications. Gothic cathedrals owe part of their design to what Europeans learned in the East. But the costs were real. Entire communities were destroyed. Hatred between Christians and Muslims deepened into cultural memory. The wounds shaped politics, religion, and identity for centuries after the last battle was fought. The Crusades ended more than 700 years ago. History remembers them for sieges, kings, and battles that decided the fate of empires. But those empires were built on the backs of people who never held power. They were built by farmers who left their fields, women who ran estates alone, merchants who risked everything on dangerous roads, and children who grew up in the shadow of war. They were lived in markets where cultures collided, in sickbeds where strangers became healers, and in prayers whispered by people who didn't know if tomorrow would come. The Crusades weren't just fought, they were survived. and the people who survived them, ordinary, forgotten, resilient, are the ones who truly shaped the world that came after. The wars ended, but the lives of those who survived them shaped everything that